The journey out west was filled with both perils and setbacks, but unlike the Oregon Trail, nobody that we know of anyway dealt with dysentery. Now it's back to SunTrust Park for the defending champion Braves, and here to decide who's hot, who's not in the series ahead. We're Battery Power TV, Cory McCartney, along with Grant McAuley. And Grant, there were some highs in a reunion with a certain first baseman, but maybe the best thing about this trip out west is that it's over.
Yeah, and we know that these trips out west sometimes for the Braves have gone sideways. I don't think that you can get too upset about a 3-4 road trip, but you did have a chance, I think, for a 4-3 road trip. So that would probably be the missed opportunity that you've got there. But yeah, I mean, I think we saw some things that make you feel kind of good about what some Braves are doing. And you saw some things that were a continuation of some early season struggles for some others. We're going to get into all of it, but by and large, you go out, you split a series with the San Diego team that I think is going to be competitive this year. There's no two ways about that. And then you go to a place in Dodger Stadium that you've won one series in the last decade in the regular season, really in the postseason too, for if we're being honest about that. But semantics aside, it could have been worse for the Braves, but you hate to keep saying that about every time they go out to California.
Well, the Marlins and Cubs to follow in this 6-game homestand that gets started Friday night. But before we look ahead, let's take a stock of who's hot and who's not, and we'll get started with our hot list. Grant, who tops yours?
Well, I'm going to go with a 2-for-1 here. You might have seen this tweet, but Max Fried showing what he did against the Dodgers, certainly, and Kyle Wright through a couple of starts has really given the Braves everything they could have asked for from him. That duo right there is going to be, I think, leading the Braves staff in the early going. Charlie Morton's going to have to get kind of reestablished after the broken leg. He's had a couple of starts that just haven't gone the way he wanted them to. And then Ian Anderson's had a good one and a bad one heading into the homestand. We're going to see him again against Miami. But I think that the starting staff right now is feeding off of Max Fried. He's the ace. He's the opening day pitcher for a reason. Kyle Wright, though, a little bit more surprising. But these two guys have faced over 100 batters this year. They have walked exactly 2 of them. They have given up 3 extra base hits. And they're just doing exactly what you need in the early going for a pitching staff that, like all the pitching staffs across baseball, didn't have a lot of time to ramp up for the season.
Well, topping my list is Matt Olson. I mean, it's just been an absolute tear from him. He's 3rd in the game in average, 4th in weighted run created plus and weighted on base average, 5th in OPS, 5th in total bases with 32. The StatCast numbers are ridiculous. He's in the 95th percentile or higher in exit velocity, max exit velocity, expected weighted on base average, expected average, all while posting a walk rate that's in the 96th percentile. I dove into this in my starting 9 this week a little bit more, but his current weighted run created plus is the highest of any Braves player in April since Fangraphs began going back and viewing those monthly totals in 2002. And his OPS right now would be the 5th highest in franchise history in the month of April. So certainly a lot to like with Matt Olson with what we're seeing. Who's next for you?
Marcell Ozuna is going to be next for me. I think that this has been kind of exactly what the Braves needed. If Marcell was going to be back in the fray and back in the middle of the lineup, they needed him to be productive. They couldn't afford to have somebody going through the struggles of missing significant time and just not coming back ready to do what he had done so well prior to that. We're seeing high exit velocities. I think he's still in the top 3 or 5 at the very least in all of Major League Baseball, depending on, what day it is. But this dude is still hitting line drives 100 plus miles an hour the way that he did in 2020. And if they're getting that version of Marcell Ozuna, or honestly anything close to his career norms over an average 162 games, I think that they're going to be pretty happy with what he's providing in the middle of the lineup. And he had to provide something because the Braves made some changes in other places, a couple of familiar faces that had to, go find another place to work after October, and Jorge Soler, who we'll be seeing with Miami. And of course, Jock Peterson, who's out in San Francisco. It's kind of a wild card here. And thus far, Marcell has shown up and looked like the slugger that he was when he first joined the Braves.
Okay, next for me, I'm going to a guy that you mentioned in your first one, and that's Max Fried. And I mean, obviously an absolute gem against the Dodgers from him. And I think we already know that Max Fried is an absolute big game pitcher. And this is kind of a convoluted thing here, but I found this really interesting. He had a 5.73 ERA in his first 2 starts, rebounded nicely. If you go back to last season, he had a 3.78 ERA against teams with losing records, 1.99 against teams with winning records. And if you go back to the start of 2020, he is the major's best ERA against teams with winning records at 1.78. His next scheduled start is against the Cubs, who currently don't have a winning record. So make of that what you will. But in big games, Max Fried shows up better than almost anybody. And we saw that again against the Dodgers. Who do you got next?
Yeah, if I had to pick one more, because I did kind of cheat and go for a 2-for-1 with Kyle Wright and Max Fried together, kind of the tag team division of who's hot, who's not, I would go with Colin McHugh. I think that he has really shrugged off what was an unfortunate home run allowed in his Braves debut, and he has come out and punched out a lot of batters in innings and situations where I think the Braves have needed to see that, needed to get that, and hopefully that's a trend that can continue as we move through the season. But 12 strikeouts to his first 5 1/3 innings this year. You got a reliever with that kind of strikeout rate, that kind of prowess, and a guy that doesn't even throw that hard. He's just moving the ball around, as Paul Bird likes to say, just spinning it. Thus far, I think that Colin McHugh has been a very worthy addition to the Braves night shift, the Braves bullpen, the Braves pitching staff, all of the above.
Absolutely. Last for me is Travis d'Arnaud. And after the setbacks of his health and his thumb issue a year ago, I mean, following that Silver Slugger 2020, he's rebounded big times, hitting 22% above league average after, oddly enough, hitting 22% below league average a year ago. Already gone deep twice. In the early stages, all the expected rates are up. The hard hit rate, barrel rates, all that stuff is trending in the wrong direction, but he's proving far more productive early on, and that's a big thing for this team. So moving on to who's not hot. Start things off for us, Grant.
Well, I don't think there's any bigger name. I'm sure this is on both of our lists. Braves shortstop Dansby Swanson, who's punching out at a nearly 50% clip thus far this year. He really seems to just be off in his timing, and we've seen it before. He's a streaky player. A lot of the commentary that I get throughout the game on social media and just in general around the team has been, wow. I mean, we've seen him have some rough patches, but is this the worst one that we've seen in terms of strikeouts? I'd have to say that it is. He's gone through some cold spells where the hits just aren't falling, and you stack up a few 0 for 4s and 0 for 3s. The next thing you know, maybe you get a base hit and you turn around and you've had a week where you're 1 for 24 or something like that. But this is just, it feels a little bit different, a little bit more frustrating, and it's certainly more magnified because this is the first set of stats he's getting right out of opening day. But as I've said, and as I would add with him and with probably a couple of other players on our list, it's not going to be this way for all 162 games. It just feels like a lot here early because he hasn't been able to really contribute much to the Braves, who are right now just fighting to get back to 500, a story that we talked about for quite a while in 2021.
Yeah, to echo you, I mean, it is Dansby Swanson atop my list too, tied for the league lead right now with 22 Ks. He's riding a 17-game streak with at least a strikeout, which is some dubious territory. BJ Upton has the Braves' longest streak at 22, so you hate to see him climbing towards that. I know strikeouts don't matter in this age, but you look at the top 4 in terms of the strikeout streaks for the Braves. Ronald Acuna Jr. owns 2 of those. We know how productive he's been. Dansby Swanson has a 393 OPS during this current streak, hitting 125. So you got to do something, even if you're going to strike out. And he's not doing a lot outside of whiffing right now. Who's number 2 for you?
Well, I mean, I'm really looking at the bottom of the Braves order, and it's kind of a list, a hit list. I mean, I'm going to go with Eddie Rosario in my next one. I'm sure that he probably could make your list as well. Picked up a hit against the Dodgers that I thought maybe that could start to get him going, and maybe it will. Obviously, not much time has passed since the Dodgers series. We'll see if he comes home and this, starts to turn a bit. But I think Eddie's slow start, coupled with Dansby's slow start, coupled with Adam Duvall with a bit of a slow start, all of those, when you look at the 5 through 9 spots in the order, at the very least 7 through 9, as I did on Twitter on Thursday, you're just seeing a lot of just unproductive at bats and the lack of results, lack of on base, lack of OPS. And obviously there's going to be a lack of runs scored because they're not on base to score runs, which is going to trickle down to the top of the order or back to the top of the order, where Matt Olson is sitting up there batting second in the Braves order with 2 RBI, both coming on solo home runs. So I'm going to track it back in there and kind of point at Eddie Rosario. I think the Braves would have liked to have seen him maybe take a more active role toward the top of the order, but you can't do it while he's hitting like this. So he's kind of been buried somewhere in the 6 through 9 spots in that Braves order. But I did want to go back and kind of look at the Dansby Swanson, stats in particular. I pulled up what the Braves pitchers hit last year. I looked at what the 9 spot in the order, which has largely been Dansby Swanson this year, is doing. And the Braves pitchers were more productive by and large in a very small sample size with a 131 batting average, as opposed to Braves 9-hole hitters batting 190. If you don't want to put it all on Swanson, because maybe that's not fair, other guys have gotten some at-bats in that, just looking at what you were hoping to get by adding another offensive player to your lineup, you were hoping it would outproduce your pitchers, and the 9 spot has not done that thus far.
Well, hopefully by the end of the season, those numbers will look drastically different. But yes, number 2 on my list is also Eddie Rosario, a 299 OPS right now. the first month of the season always has been bad for him. Only once has he been having an over 600 OPS, but this is just, obviously wrong territory for him coming off of his postseason heroics. I will say though, he's been fantastic across his career in the month of May, and 810 career OPS. So hopefully you want to see some positive signs from him leading into that second month of the season. Who's the final name on your not hot list?
Well, as far as at the plate, it's Adam Duvall, but I do want to give a tip of the cap for him for being the guy in center field for the Braves for an elongated period of time now, not just that playoff run, but also coming into 2022, once again, taking up that mantle. And I feel like playing a pretty good center field, but we know Duvall's another streaky hitter. Strikeouts are a big part of his game. Typically, you're going to see him punch out somewhere between 30 and 35% of his at-bats in the average year. The flip side of that is he has kind of a knack for coming up with some big hits, big moments, big home runs that help the Braves either get back into games, win games, or put games away. And I think the same could be said a little bit for Dansby Swanson, but who's been one of the Braves' best overall performers in these higher leverage situations and with runners in scoring position. So again, it's a 162 game season. Yeah, we're closing in on 10% of that being played once a couple of these Marlins games are under our belts, but there's a lot of time for these guys to turn it around. Thus far at the plate, though, Adam has just really not seemed to get locked in yet. We're not seeing the power production, the run production, and he is, of course, a contributor to the bottom half of the Braves order really underperforming, while the top of the Braves order has performed pretty well despite no Ronald Acuna Jr.
Final thing for me here is the Braves' lack of production with men on. I mean, they're hitting homers. They're tied for the overall lead with 16, but only one of them has been outside of the solo variety. Among teams with 12 or more homers, no one has fewer runs produced off those homers than the Braves do. That's because they're 15th in average and 20th in weighted run created plus with men on base. That all leads to a team that's going deep on the regular, but they're 15th in runs scored. So figures to work itself out with all the power in this lineup, but it's certainly not helping matters at this point. The Braves have the Marlins coming up, and Grant, every time we talk about the Marlins, starting pitching is going to top the conversation. Miami comes in third in starting pitching WAR behind the Giants and Mets, but the Braves can take solace in the fact that they don't have to see what thus far has been the most productive starting pitchers in this rotation, and that's Pablo Lopez and Sandy Alcantara.
Yeah, no, they've got to be really happy about that. I was watching some of Pablo Lopez's start on Thursday against St. Louis, and this guy was just carving that lineup up. So you got to be happy you don't see those guys, but some of the other arms that the Marlins are going to be throwing in this series, it's one of the reasons why when we did our NL East preview, I said, you know what, I'm going to get a little bit outside the box here, and I'm going to give the Marlins credit for maybe being the most talented starting rotation in the National League East. All due respect to the Mets and their signing of Max Scherzer and going out and getting Chris Bassett, but with no Jacob deGrom, I don't say that group top to bottom is necessarily the best 1 through 5. I think the Marlins have a chance with some breakout candidates or some guys who can simply build on what they showed last year, particularly Alcantara and Pablo Lopez. And, if you get Eliezer Hernandez going, Jesus Luzardo going, Trevor Rogers, who we're going to see as well. I mean, this is a talented group 1 through 5. And I do feel like, it's going to be some trouble for hitters across baseball if these guys get locked in. They have really reloaded in the best possible way. And you have to think about the fact they traded Zach Gallen away to get Jazz Chisholm. So they had another arm who could have been in this mix. And that's just goes to show you what the Marlins have been able to accomplish. But they got to score runs too. They got to do all the things it takes to win games. Pitching is certainly one of them. The hitting, I'm not sure that they're quite there yet.
Yeah, the pitching matchups for this one is Rogers against Kyle Wright on Friday, Hernandez against Ian Anderson on Saturday, and Luzardo and Bryce Elder on Sunday. Kyle Wright, I mean, you mentioned it when we went through our hot list. He's been fantastic so far, 1.64 ERA. Current Marlins are hitting 158 against him with a 589 OPS. So this is a great opportunity for Kyle Wright to continue his hot start. We saw him do it, carve out the Marlins in the postseason as well. So the team that he's had some success against, this seems an opportune time for Kyle Wright to keep things rolling and get that third straight really strong start to open up the 22 season. The Cubs come to Atlanta for a 3-game series beginning on Tuesday. And, certainly we don't want to get too much into the pitching matchups. I think there's an interesting player in this series, Grant, that was the NL Player of the Week. He's cooled off a little bit, but I'm really excited to see Japanese star Seiya Suzuki up close.
Yeah, I mean, this was a big signing for the Cubs, who are kind of in that weird transitional phase where I don't think that they've backed into wanting to go 100% with this rebuild, but the faces that we knew from the Cubs with Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, John Lester, Javi Baez, all the guys that you thought about when you thought about the 2016 club or just that 4 or 5 year stretch there. Those are not guys who are currently putting on a Cubs uniform. So it's a different looking team, but Suzuki is going to be an exciting player. And they've got a couple of other younger sluggers in Frank Schwindel, Patrick Wisdom, who they showed some signs last year of being at least capable sluggers and putting some thump in the lineup. But the Cubs, I think, have a lot to prove this year, and this season could go a long way towards kind of tracking their trajectory towards, going out and spending money again. No jokes necessary with the Ricketts family there. They've got the money. They can spend it. They didn't lose at biblical proportions. This money is still out there. They spent some of it on Suzuki. That's good, but they're going to have to make a few more shrewd moves to get themselves back to the top of the National League Central, which is a place that they aspired to be for quite a while there. And breaking a 108-year curse, I don't know if it gets much better than that for the Cubs.
Yeah, Suzuki's been in the top 10 in WAR, hitting well over 100% over league average, been a catalyst for that lineup. I'm got my eyes, though, on new dad Austin Riley in this series as a player to watch. Had over 1,300 OPS a year ago against the Cubs. Then also Marcell Ozuna. You mentioned all the hard hit rates that we're seeing out of him. Among his 2022 struggles, he still hit 2 homers off Cubs pitching. So I think this could be an opportune time for both of them to really open up the bats against this Cubs pitching staff. We've got you covered all season long here on Battery Power TV. If you haven't already, go to the Battery Power YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. That way you get an alert each and every time that we drop a new episode. Until next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley. We'll see you in soon, Braves Country.